Hello! Today we're looking at modal verbs, but first we're going to have a very quick review of the future. There's a worksheet on StudIP for you to do at the same time as watching the video today. Okay, ready? We have three future sentences. It will rain when we arrive, it will be raining when we arrive, it will have rained when we arrive. You need to match them to the three timelines. Please do that now. Let's go through the answers. Number 1, it will rain when we arrive. That is timeline C. So you can see first we arrive and then it starts to rain. It will rain when we arrive. Then we have number 2. It will be raining when we arrive. That's timeline B. So first it starts to rain, and then while it is still raining, bang, we arrive. It will be raining when we arrive. And so obviously number 3, it will have rained when we arrive, is timeline A. So that's a future perfect there. So you can see the period with the rain, and you can see that after that we arrive. It will have rained. It will have already rained when we arrive. Okay, I said it was a very quick review, and so it was. Let's look at today's class. We're looking at modal verbs. Very quickly. The form, not followed by to, except for have to, of course. So we say I can fly, we don't say I can to fly. Obviously. Function, there are many functions of modal verbs. It might be for ability, obligation, permission, possibility, and so on. Okay, so there are going to be 3 parts of today's class. First, we're going to compare must and have to. Then we have my terrorist story, and then we'll talk about rain in Fechter. You've got this document on StudIP. Please fill it in with appropriate forms of must and have to, both positive and negative sentences. On the left you've got positive sentences, on the right you've got negative sentences. I know you can't see the whole slide here, but you do have the whole picture on StudIP. And then we shall go through this in about 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay. We're starting on with the left-hand column with the second blank space down. My boss says I have to have my hair cut as I look like a hippie. So that's the answer there. We'll look at the reasons why in a moment. This is something I say to myself. Oh, I must have my hair cut, as it's really getting in my eyes. It's possible that nowadays people also say have to here. I think especially in American English, but don't quote me on that. Okay. So I would accept both options for this. But the more traditional one, at least in Britain, would be to say, oh, I must have my hair cut. You mustn't smoke in here. It's not allowed. Of course, there are many other options. You're not allowed to, you shouldn't, etc. But for the sake of this exercise, we're only looking at must and have to. Mustn't. Notice we don't pronounce the first T. Mustn't. You don't have to go to the party if you don't want to. It's your decision. So this is a problem area for German speakers. because you would say du musst nicht or something like that, right? But of course we used mustn't in a different way. So here we've got you don't have to go to the party. At the top left we have this, and let's imagine this is a sign written in quite formal language. Visitors must sign in at reception. Okay, you might normally expect something like visitors are expected to, or visitors are requested to sign in at reception. But just sticking with the must and have to thing. This is in the same box in the top left-hand corner as my boss says I have to have my hair cut. Because if you saw this sign and you were with a friend, you would read the sign, visitors must sign in at reception, and then you would turn to your friend and you would say, hey look, we have to sign in at reception. Okay, so the very formal version would be must, but then you'd say to your friend, we have to sign in. So what's this all about? You'll notice that I've drawn a horizontal pink line across the middle of this sheet. The words above the sheet, must, have to, and mustn't, they have something in common above the pink line. And the words below the pink line, must or have to, and don't have to, they have something in common with each other. If you want, you can pause the video to have a bit of a think before I tell you the answer. See if you can work it out. If so, then pause it now. Okay, this is about free will, isn't it? It's about permission and who can choose what happens. So above the pink line, these are external influences following the norms and standards, so things that you have to do or things that someone else tells you that you have to do. In linguistics, this is called deontic modality, but you don't need to know that for this course. Below the line, this is where you do have free will. This is your own decision making. So this is internal. If above the line was external influences, I think I said internal. Above is external, below is internal. This is epistemic modality. You don't need to know that term either. So you can see we have these different, if you want, these different concepts, and language is twisted to address these concepts. And so this is how must and have to work in English, just to address the idea of whether the decision-making power is external or internal. Right, let's have my video, let's have my terrorist story. Number 2 on the list today is the terrorist story. So this happened quite a few years ago when I was living in Denmark, but you'll find that this could have happened in the same way in Germany. I was watching a program on television about a Danish woman who wanted to go on holiday to America, and she found that she wasn't allowed to go because she was on a CIA terrorist list. This shocked her because she wasn't a terrorist. And so she got some journalists to help her to find out what was happening. Now it turned out that she owned a women's clothes shop, and a lot of the clothes that she imported were from Pakistan. So this journalist went to Pakistan. I should explain this was shortly after 9/11, etc. This journalist went to Pakistan, and he was in the middle of nowhere, and he spoke to the owner of a factory that made clothes which this woman in Denmark imported. And he said something in his very Danish English, which is something which you could easily hear a German say as well. And what he said was this.
I'm here because I've heard that you should be connected to terrorists. That's what he said. You know, when I teach this in class, normally I'd say maybe 1/8 of the students recognise the problem straight away. After a little bit longer to think about it, maybe 1/4 of the students see what the problem is. The problem is, of course, with should be. When you say should, it basically means I think it would be a good idea if. So, you should call him basically means I think it would be a good idea if you called him. So in this sentence, it sounds like his next sentence is going to be, so I'm here because I've heard that you should be connected to terrorists, because I just met some down the street and I got their phone number. I can give it to you if you want. That's what it sounds like. Now, this usage of should, I think it did exist, and I think that with literature from the 19th century, for instance, you might find this use of should. But it rarely exists in English nowadays. So I want you to pause the video just for a moment and think, how can you correct this sentence? And I'll tell you the answer in 2 seconds. 1, 2. There are 2 options. You can keep the element of possibility with a modal verb. So could be, might be, maybe, they all work here. Or you can say the sentence without a modal verb and just say, I'm here because I've heard that you are connected to terrorists. That would work here as well. Number 3. You've got this exercise on StudIP. So please pause the video to work out which modal verb is the odd one out. You can use all 4 options in this sentence. It's beep, rain, in Fechter, in July. But one of these modal verbs is used differently to the other 3. Please pause, make up your mind, and then continue watching. Please pause now. The odd one out, as you can see, is can. You see, could, may, and might can all be used in this sentence for future possibility. It could rain in Fechter in July. So that's July 2020, that's next month. It may rain in Fechter in July, that's the same, and it might rain in Fechter in July. These are all referring just to this one July, next month. Those are future possibilities. When we say can, we're talking about general possibility. So that's every July. It can rain in Fechter in July. Cannot be used in this way for future possibility. So you can see the difference there.
Okay, so that's today's class. Just a brief look at some of the main issues which appear in people's language with modal verbs. You'll need to look in your grammar book because each individual person has different issues with modal verbs. You'll find, for example, if you're using my Grammar Advanced or whatever it's called, you'll find that as well as the normal units in the module about modal verbs. There's also a section with just over 2 pages in a big purple box somewhere in the appendix. Page 162, something like that, 362, I can't remember. My book's still in the office. And with any other grammar book, you'll also probably have a section in the appendix as well as the main part of the book. Have a really good look through the whole section. For example, when I normally use my Grammar Advanced, I need people to understand everything on those 2 and a bit pages in the purple boxes. So what I recommend is that you have a really good look at the forms and the examples. Decide which ones you already know and use and feel comfortable with. Then you will have a shorter list of forms which you weren't aware of, and those are the ones which you can focus your attention on. Okay. I'm not giving you any specific homework because everyone has to find their own homework with this. Okay. Next week, in our next class, conditionals. Okay. So if I'm able to make the video, conditional sentences coming up next. See you then.